cooking through hour number 2 here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome back inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local shows, including the Jake Feinberg Show, anywhere in the world. We're full-on extraterrestrial radio, and very happy you could make us part of your day today. Without further ado, I want to bring back a friend of the program. I had a great half-hour hang with him last time, and looking forward to doing it again. Reed Mathis, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. How's it going, man?
How you doing, my man?
I'm doing all right.
You know, you talked. I asked the question I asked you before we lost contact last time was who was the best leader you worked under, and you mentioned Robert Walter, and I was hoping you could. You didn't have a chance to expand on why.
Yeah. Let's see what I can come up with here.
So just riff, man.
I mean, I love Robert so much. I remember someone giving me like a CDR of the Gray Boy All Stars back in the 90s when I lived in Oklahoma, and I remember them saying, "Check this band out," and I was sort of like, well, I don't know, it seems like normal funk music, and they were like, listen to the keyboard player, just my buddy queued up a specific solo. No, we didn't know anybody's name that was in the band, but we geeked out on this one piano solo. But then a few years later, I met the guy and figured out that was the guy on that CD. When Jacob Fred kind of started, we got a new booking agent after about 6 years that we'd been playing, and he suddenly was like, "How come you guys don't play jam band gigs?" And we were like, I don't know what that means." And he was like, like Fish, like Grateful Dead. And we were like, it's not really our deal. And the guy was like, well, I think that those kids would like you, so I'm going to book you, there. And then we started meeting all these jam band musicians. And I loved them, but a lot of them treated us like we were definitely not like in the club, definitely like I don't know, a lot of we started calling it the funk clique, right. Of like all these players that had like a jazz background, but they were just really coloring inside the lines and almost militant about whether you're doing it authentically or not, So Robert was one of the only ones of all those traditional funk players that loved what Jacob Fred did. And he was always coming to check us out at festivals, and then he had us open for his band in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, and his audience didn't really care to see what Jacob Fred was doing, but he loved it and really supported it. And then he and I were in the Steve Kimmock band together for about a year, and that was just incredible. And I feel like he filled in a bunch of music history that I didn't know. He's like a real great scholar of music history and various traditions and why people play the way they play and how audiences use music. And just, I learned so much from him, and he just has such a positive attitude as somebody to be on the road with, and he's just a delight on stage and all that. And then about a year later, the Gray Boy All Stars, their bass player was having a kid, and it was him and his wife's first child, and the baby was overdue by like 4 or 5 weeks, and it was turning into a bit of a health crisis.
Yeah.
And Gray Boy was going to have to cancel the tour, and Robert asked if I could play bass for them.
Oh, wow.
And gave me 24 hours notice and 40 MP3s, and a flight to Chicago. And I learned 40 Gray Boy All-Star songs and then played bass for Gray Boy All-Stars for a month. And that was the first time. I mean, like, Steve Kimmock didn't really count because I had known him since I was in my early 20s, and he almost felt more like an uncle than a boss,
Absolutely.
But when Robert hired me for Gray Boy, that was the first time anybody outside of Jacob Fred and my immediate friend group took a chance on me, really, and gave me any responsibility. So that was kind of a big deal, and I remember Carl Benson making a little speech my first night on stage with them, that I was their guest and that I was like handling my business like a man. I remember him saying that, and that really touched me, man. I almost started crying.
Yeah, no, I dig.
You know what I mean?
I dig.
It was like a really paternal. They were very nurturing, paternal kind of guys towards me, and especially since I had felt like such an outsider among all these sort of funk improvisers, getting approval from them meant a great deal to me. And then Robert started occasionally hiring me for his solo stuff, and that's when I really got to see what he's made of. And I was just, to this day, I am just so thankful to know him and to get to play with him. I feel so acceptable when I'm with him. I feel like my take on that sort of funky boogaloo New Orleans thing is like, I think it's cool. It's definitely not correct or whatever. Like, I don't sound like any of the famous bass players from that tradition. And I have tried, and it's dumb when I do it. Nobody likes it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfect that you're putting your own accent on it. I mean, I don't. To me, this is emboldening. I mean, for people that are gonna, turn on this interview in 25 years, and we're both kind of graybeard. It's like, to me, I transcribed this from our first interview. I mean, you said if you're truly doing something unique, who's the audience? Who do you market that to? What's the demographic for something that doesn't have a name? Go ahead. I mean, to me, it's like, this is imperative, because there are people out there. Should I conform or should I be true to myself? And you're a living example of somebody who was, I'm not going to say outcasted, but you didn't feel comfortable in the club. And I mean, I'm talking about perseverance and just being headstrong enough to say, I don't want to comp because it never comes out right. I want to do my own thing. You can riff on that.
Well, I thank you, and I see what you're saying. My experience does not really resemble that, in a certain sense, because I have never chosen to be unique or non-traditional. In fact, I've gone to great lengths to try to conform.
Really?
When Robert Walter hires me and sends me a bunch of songs by the Meters and rare groove tracks from the 60s and 70s by people I've never heard of, and whatever, and I learn them, man. I'm not like, how can I put my spin on this? I never once asked myself that.
I dig.
And ever on any gig am I like, how can I make this my own? But that's attributed to me a lot, and I think I understand why. But I just, if we're going to talk about it, I just want to like make it clear that like there's no part of me that wants to be. There's no part of me that wants to be unique or different.
No. I want to read. This is also from earlier in the conversation. You said I didn't turn out like this because I was on some kind of quest for it. So just to be clear, this is a completely organic, natural thing. It's not like you're trying to force anything, and you have tried to conform, but inevitably.
Honestly, it's like it's a miracle I get to play at all, because because I've done none of it correctly, and I have tried so hard. But I feel like what I do come up with works just well enough that some people find it satisfactory, and that is that's I have some confidence that that if I do my best, it'll be somewhat satisfactory. But I'm not trying to do something different. But the other thing is that I've noticed that my amount of enjoyment on stage directly correlates to how much self-acceptance I'm experiencing. And if I am resisting my nature, it doesn't even feel like I'm resisting my nature. It feels like I'm trying to please somebody or something. But I just get so discouraged, and it's a really unpleasant experience emotionally and physically. And usually after gigs like that, like my back hurts.
Wow.
And stuff, But if I, for some reason, am able to think that even if I play shitty, it's okay, or not shitty, but if I do it wrong, if I play the style wrong or something, or if I play the role of bassist wrong, that it's still okay, that it's really maybe not that big of a deal, and maybe the consequences are slight, and then so I can relax, then I love it, and sometimes that joy carries me through, and the audience likes it, and the other players like it, not because I'm playing good, but because I'm joyful.
Right.
So the approach that I've ended up with is basically like aim for feeling acceptable, and then rather than focus on whether my playing is working, focus on whether I am enjoying it. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, this is fantastic stuff. Can you point to like early in your career when you were playing with your folks? I mean, you seem to be trying to strike this delicate balance between being totally true to yourself and then also feeling an obligation to please. I mean, did your folks have something to do with that at all? I mean, is there something that in your earlier career or your childhood that you started to play at such a young age that?
I mean, my parents are meticulous musicians, and my grandfathers were conductors and very strict, I guess would be the word. And I never got direct instruction from any of them, but I was in their ensembles, and I saw. I mean, I definitely learned a lot about how to lead a group and how to conduct a rehearsal and how to carry yourself with authority. But I definitely learned that there's a right way to play this music, classical music, I guess.
Right.
And I never could, and I was so frustrating because I loved music so much. And I couldn't understand why, when I did my very best, it still didn't sound right. It still didn't sound like what it was. It didn't. I could never hit that target, And it wasn't for lack of trying. And meanwhile, they're all telling me I'm so talented, and yet whenever I try to play or sing or something, it was like it never came out right.
It's unbelievable.
So I was getting real mixed messages. You're so talented. You're such a natural. And that's not it. That's not right. That's not right. And then I developed I really developed loving playing, but pretty much alone, like in my room.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really loved playing my instrument, but I didn't want to do it with other people or around other people because I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was disappointing them. So, when I started trying to play rock and jazz and funk and all this other stuff, it's like I just could not shake the feeling that I was doing it wrong and that these people deserve better. And I still don't really have a cure for that, except for sort of a manual override of the entire question by just saying, you know what? Excuse me. By saying, you know what? I'm not here to do a good job. I'm here to enjoy my life. And my task on this stage with these musicians, with this audience, is to feel okay, not to play well. So I just shifted the whole thing there, but I got a huge boost when I was 19. And Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey, we'd been playing together for about a year and a half, and we got our first touring gigs outside of Oklahoma, and it was this is in the autumn of 1995, opening for Medeski, Martin and Wood. And I had never been on the road before, and I had not seen much live improvising outside of like my parents' friends and videos, you know. And I got to say, man, the stuff Medeski, Martin and Wood was playing in 1995, I felt like I was watching Bird and Dizzy and, you know, Bird and Dizzy in 45 or Louis Armstrong and King Oliver in 25 or, you know, Train and Elvin in 65. I was like, I am seeing, I am witnessing history right now. I'm seeing the real thing. This is the rare air. And so luckily, you know, I was 19. John Medeski was 30 at the time. And, you know, they were all three real sweet, but John was the one who didn't seem annoyed when I when I talked at him.
Sure.
And I remember one night they just played so great. We were in Kansas City, and John was feeling friendly, so we had a long talk after the gig. And I asked him, like, man, you know, you seem so confident, you know, and he was like, well, thank you, you know, and I was like, are you ever ashamed when you're improvising? Like, do you ever feel embarrassed that you are playing the way you play? And he said, oh my gosh, all the time. And I was like, really? Because I never feel that from you. You know, like, you just feel like a force of nature. So what are you doing with the shame? Because you say you feel that all the time. And he's like, yeah. I was like, what do you do? How do you get rid of that feeling? And he's like, you don't. And I said, okay, so what do you do with it? And he was like, dude, that's your A game. I was like, what? He was like, you're not playing your top shelf stuff until you're embarrassed. I was like, say that again. And he was like, you're embarrassed because you're telling the truth. You're embarrassed because you're being honest with the listeners. If you're not embarrassed, it's because you're manipulating them. You're hiding. You're successfully hiding your flaws, and your humanity, and you're pretending to be what nobody is, which is normal. And if you are improvising in front of people and you are ashamed of what's coming out, that's because you are telling the truth about who you are. And that is your A game. I promise you, if you record your gigs and listen back, the nights when you felt ashamed of your playing will be the hippest shit. And I was like, oh my God, I have never forgotten that. I
want to ask you something. I mean, you obviously have a high musical IQ. I mean, in classical music, essentially, I've talked to cats that have branched off into other different all musics, and I really loved our first conversation because, like you said, in hindsight, they've dubbed it classical music, but you know that's not what Beethoven had in mind when he made his music. But but I mean,
music never comes from that.
Exactly, and I'm curious. You know, growing up, because you had a high musical IQ, you were surrounded by people that were meticulous. The idea that you had to constantly take the direction from the conductor, and that there was no opportunity to feel quote unquote ashamed, even though every time you played, it was different, and you were always feeling shame. I mean, did part of it have to do with that you just always intrinsically you wanted to create new vocabulary and not always be at the whim of what the conductor, of what it says on the sheet? I mean, can we point to that as maybe a crux of the the angst that you were dealing with because you never could play what was on the paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we got it. All right. No, I mean, because I think we're getting down to it. But I mean, you said you never took direct instruction, so you never really failed in that sense. No one ever had to come and tell you to do this or do that. I don't know. I mean,
well, they did. I mean, I was in, I was in my dad's choirs starting at 5. And I was in a youth orchestra starting when I was 7. And those are the places I mostly got reprimanded for not for doing something that wasn't asked of me, for volunteering.
Right.
Something.
Right.
But I wasn't saying to myself, I should volunteer something, or man, I really want to do this different, or I didn't want that. I don't know why I was doing it, but it really wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun to get called out like that and to feel like when you're a teenager, you're like you look at these like rebel figures and you're like, oh, what a badass, he didn't give a shit. But that's assuming that person looked at society and said, nah, that's not for me.
That's right.
But what if you looked at society and said, like, ooh, that looks awesome, but then they were like, no, you're not doing it right. That's a different kind of outsider. You're not like the cool lone wolf. You're like locked out, and that's just a real different feeling. And for whatever reason, that's been a huge part of my experience all along. But to circle back to your original question, the amazing thing about Robert Walter is that he is, of all the people I know who can bullseye traditional music, he's the one who also finds me acceptable. And it is the feeling of ease and relief that I have on stage with him is just beyond price for me, And I've seen him play with lots of bass players, and everybody else he plays with on the bass is very traditional. And I wonder if that sounds better, or if that's better for what the audience is paying to hear. But I don't want to overthink it because I'm just so glad he likes me. I think that when he's playing with me, he likes our friendship as much, if not more, than what I'm actually playing. But that's okay. I'll take it.
And that's pure speculation. I'm going to have to interview him and get to the bottom of it. But we have a game on this program, Reed, called Name That Voice. I want to play this clip for you. This is from a previous radio show of mine, and come back and talk about it. Philadelphia at your brownstone, and you talked to me about the fact that every day is a new day, in the sense that you have little to no memory from the day or two before.
Yeah,
and I say to myself, well, my gosh, listening back to that interview, I said, isn't it much easier to live in the now, in that condition?
It truly. But they more or less hover. They hover over your intentions, over your focus. For instance, I have upcoming events that shall take place, and they are shelved as upcoming events. So these are things that do exist in the moment, but they're not pondered over and they're not really focused upon until I get closer to those appointed dates. As far as what took place already, I think the interest and the intention to be as precise and as accurate as possible in everything I do has a great deal to do with coming to rest once something is done. When something is completed, I know I did the best I could up until that moment. And then from that moment forward, it's foolish to entertain myself with memories of something that already has come to fruition.
All right, Mr. Mathis, who do you think that is?
Man, I don't know. Who is that? Who is that person?
Is a collaborator of yours, Pat Martino.
What? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Pat was my,
Wow.
if you can believe this or not, back in April of 2011, he was my first musician guest ever. We've done five.
Wow.
We've done 5 hours of. I visited him in Philly, and I mean, when I I've been transcribing some of our interviews and trying to find good pictures of you, and I typed in a picture. I typed in Reed Mathis images, and a couple pictures of Pat came up. I said, wait, what's going on here? And then I started to look at it. I'm like, you guys played earlier this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, last February.
First of all, to me, Pat has been, he's like an uncle to me, but I'm just curious as to how did you even cross paths originally with Pat? And ultimately, as a subset B of the question, what he was talking about there was once things are done, there's no reason to perseverate on them and move forward. And I kind of wanted you to talk about that because you play in different bands and you are now a leader in your own right. How much do you hold on to musical experiences, and how easily are you able to let them go?
Not sure what you mean.
Okay, well, why don't you just take the Pat Martino question first? How did you meet? How did you connect originally with Pat?
I only played with him that one time, and it was. I was suggested by someone, and we didn't even rehearse. So really, we only barely spoke. We had one good long talk over dinner. But honestly, I don't really know him, and I know that many of my friends hold him in really high esteem, but I've also never really listened to him.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Oklahoma, my friend Richard had, my friend Richard had a album of his. I don't remember what it was called, but I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
I heard it a bunch.
Yeah.
At his house.
Sure.
And I really liked it, but I never picked up the album cover really and figured out what I was listening to. But I do remember being like, "Is this that one thing?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, that's that one thing." But I really enjoyed the hang with him, and honestly, I can't say that the playing was that fun for me.
Yeah,
but,
no, I want you to be honest.
The hang was really fun. He's an amazing guy.
I mean, again, I prolific guitar player, and really the hang is. I'm actually curious about the conversation you guys had, because that guy is he's a deep guy who's been through a lot of stuff. You talk. What was the?
Yeah.
What can you talk about? What you guys were hanging about at dinner?
Well, oddly enough, a buddy of mine here in San Francisco who is from Japan. He is a sushi chef and owns a restaurant here, and speaks in very broken English, but comes to see all my gigs, and we attend a lot of the same stuff. We seem to like similar music, But he told me that he got Pat's autograph in like 1976 on this record, and if there was anything I could do to get him to sign it again, he would be forever in my debt. So I just invited him to dinner, and I mostly let them talk. Because my friend Ao is a lifelong fan.
Right. That's interesting. So, I mean, how did the gig, were you familiar with the drummer that you played with, or like, how did the gig come about?
I'm not sure.
Fair enough. No, talk what Pat was talking about there, and that just the idea, like, just from my, sometimes I'll do an interview, and I might listen back to it a few times, or I won't listen back to it at all. And I noticed that, with my friends, my generation, a little bit younger, they can get really caught up in their work instead of, and again, it's helpful to have lots of events and upcoming gigs and new things to move on to. But I'm just curious about, in your career, if you are, how quickly you're able to let the music go, insofar as do you hang on to stuff, or did you ever hang on to music that you played for a while and perseverated on it to a degree? I'm just curious about how quickly you're able to let that go.
What does perseverating mean?
Ruminating on it, listening to it over and over again, listening to the sound, the adjusting the levels, doing this, that, instead of just saying I did my best and I'm moving on.
Well, I can tell you that I have listened to all the records I've made a lot of times, but for pleasure. I really like listening to recordings of me and my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like kind of like weird and miraculous and a strange kind of real and unreal at the same moment kind of feeling. And I really like it. So like, especially like the first 3 Jacob Fred albums, from 95, 96, and 98. Man, I have listened to those things thousands of times. And not to ruminate, I just really like it. And every time I've made a record, I've listened to it a lot. But not really ruminating. I'm just sort of in awe of the fact that it exists. Like some part of me hears it coming out of the speaker, and it just, like, I really like how I can't quite find it plausible. Like, there's something about it that that it just blows my mind that it's real, that it really happened, and that I'm really hearing it. So, my moment-to-moment experience has always been so, I guess, overwhelming that I'm. I don't feel like I'm being very articulate, but when I hear it back, stripped of the intensity of responding to the moment, and it sounds unthreatening, and that is very pleasurable for me. So I have listened back.
Go ahead.
I have listened back a lot, and every time I do a tour with a project I really care about, or a project that was particularly challenging, I will listen to. I'll pick a night that I can find a recording of and check it out. And usually, I love what I hear. Usually, I'm almost always amazed at how good it is. Not me, but like just the whole deal.
Right. That's an inspiring...
And me. And I'll be like, I just, like, I usually don't remember having played what I played, that specific stuff or whatever. And I often think it's pretty beautiful, and I like it.
Well, you were partially responsible for the music. You know, you were a collaborator, which is completely invigorating. I'm curious to ask you when I talked to Papa Molly and he mentioned that this is how in demand Reed Mathis is as a musician, is that you were the original bass player in Seven Walkers, but because it was a little bit unclear whether Billy Kreutzmann was going to commit to it full time, you had moved out to the Bay Area and you were in a band called Tea Leaf Green, or you made a decision to join that band full time, and I wanted you to talk about your experience and how hard a decision that was, because I never saw the Grateful Dead play before, and I really, to be in full disclosure, I don't see a lot of live music. I really marinate in my bubble, but there's nobody that's been more inspirational for me on my journey than Billy Kreutzmann. His drumming style, the freedom,
yes, sir.
And so
Absolutely.
and I'm curious as to if you could take us through that decision, insofar as what the experience was like with the Seven Walkers, and then how hard it was to. Well, maybe not. That's the wrong word, but you had options. But just take us through that decision in joining Tea Leaf Green.
I have made all the career navigation decisions based on where I feel most acceptable, like where I feel the most. I don't want to say permission, but
security, maybe.
Where I can be the most me.
Uh-huh.
And not because someone's preventing me. It has to do with how like if I feel okay about who I am. No one's ever like, hey, stop expressing yourself. But it's not every situation where I feel like I should express myself. But when there's a conflict, I usually go with the situation where I feel most welcome to express myself. So Seven Walkers, I didn't grow up listening to Grateful Dead music, so I didn't really know how that works. And Papa Molly is such a master at what he does, and is so deep in his thing, which I was not familiar with, that I really felt in over my head, not as far as like hanging with them, but I just felt like, they're my elders. There's a certain amount of respect due to your elders, where, I couldn't just come in there and be like, I'm 30 years younger than you, but God damn it, I got something to say on my instrument. Like,
did you feel? Hold on.
Did
you feel? But I know. Did you feel like? Was it a little bit intimidating because you felt like the window was there for you to do that, though? I think that those guys are open enough for that to be expressed, even though you felt that it wasn't your place.
I felt that it wasn't my place, and I also felt that there's a certain. It's weird being a bass player because, and I don't want to sound all martyry, but that instrument comes with sometimes comes with some pretty clear expectations of role and also of what isn't that instrument's role. There are certain things that are not quote unquote bass like, and there are certain, and you'll hear people say something about a bass player, like you'll hear somebody say, like, man, that guy's great. He just plays bass, man. He just plays bass, Like saying, like, he's not Jaco Pastorius. Like, oh, that guy, man, he just plays bass. He just plays the bass, Like he's not expressing himself or something.
Right.
And that's a huge compliment in those people's mind. Like that, it almost sounds like they're like, he knows his place. Like that guy knows his place. He doesn't speak unless spoken to or whatever, like that submissiveness is like the nobility of being a bassist or something. And that is very difficult for me because it implies that you comprehend an agreed upon social structure and hierarchy and have willfully chosen your place in it. And I do neither of those things well. So, you know, in that situation, it was just sort of like, man, I mean, these guys are creative and they're older than me, and they're definitely who these people are paying to see, not me. And, you know, and if I express myself, they would never say this, but I was like, I will be letting them down because they need a bassist. You know, if I feel like a band needs a bassist, then I feel like I can't express myself.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Totally, but this is really important. I know, because I totally understand what you're saying, but I mean, Billy played with Phil Lesh. I mean, that dude was expressing himself all the time.
And he hated it.
You think so? Really? Oh, Billy,
Well,
Billy did.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I mean, to me, I don't know how they made that work, but to me, it's like
they didn't. he was so frustrated. I mean, it's not my place to say.
It's okay. I mean, you're enlightening
I don't
me.
want to be quoted.
No, it's fine.
On it.
It's fine. You won't be. It's not a big deal. The point is that, I mean,
but they always him and Jerry always talked about. I mean, according to Bill, him and Jerry always talked about getting a bass player for that band.
Yeah.
like keeping Phil and getting a bassist.
Well, no, the funny thing is that when they took a break in '75, Phil had a band called Too Loose to Truck with a great drummer called Steve Mitchell, a fantastic drummer, lives in PA now, and he used to tell Phil, it was Phil's band. Steve used to go to Phil, you need a bass player, you know, because it's like, I mean, it's amazing. So that being said, in T-Lead, let's pivot out. So I mean, because to be honest with you, you played a lot with Billy and Papa. And I love the way it sounds, and you guys look like you're having a lot of fun. But you felt like you were more comfortable to be Reed Mathis in the full nonconformist bass style, that the music that you play with Tea Leaf Green, more so than with the Walkers.
Yes. And
can you talk about like the evolution of Tea Leaf Green? Where is the music at now? How have you guys evolved as a band? Because that was a few years.
Well, I'm not with them anymore.
You're gone. Okay.
But honestly, I love those boys, but I kind of ruined their band.
How'd you do that?
I mean, I ruined their band.
No, how?
By expressing myself.
This is a disturbing trend to be able to express yourself.
They also need a bass player.
Right. If you need a bass player, don't call Reed Mathis. That's it, you know?
Well, my contention is that, you know, I remember doing a tour with my good friend Scarrick.
Sure.
He joined Jacob Fred for some quartet touring in the early 2000s, and he got very frustrated with me one night. We were in Santa Barbara, and we were sharing a hotel room, and after the gig, he was just like, man, we got to talk, bro. This shit ain't working. And I was like, all right. I mean, I feel like it's working. I can tell you're frustrated, but I feel like it's working. And he was like, look, man, you need to understand that bass is an instrument, but it's also a role. And you have to be able to distinguish between the two, and you need to be good at both. You're real good at bass the instrument. You're not that good at bass the role. And I was like, it really hurt my feelings, and my self-esteem was shattered. And a couple of days later, I had a rebuttal, which was like, actually, I am really good at bass the role. I just think that we should all be good at bass the role and take turns. I don't think it should be only my job. I think that that bass the role just means being the stable portion of the orchestration. It doesn't mean being the low thing or the thing with four strings. It means that part of the orchestration is in motion, part of it is in flight, and part of it is a concrete floor. And the role of concrete floor can be passed around just like the role of soloist is passed around. And that is how I view it. I don't think that no one should be the concrete floor, and I don't think that it shouldn't be my job at all.
Right.
I just think the instruments should take turns.
I really can't disagree with you. I mean, to me, it seems like that cat that lectured you in Santa Barbara. I mean, to me, it's more about like ego more than anything else. I mean, to me, that's what
I don't think so. We're told from day one what a bass is, what a bass does.
Right.
Basses do this.
So people are trained.
You know?
Yeah. So there's a man. I get it. Yeah. So you grow up that way, and then you get lectured on from people that say this is what the role of the bass is. I don't know what the point of even saying you play the bass well. I mean, that's the kind of the most important thing is but I mean, you're an improviser. That's the thing, man. I mean, I don't know. You could say you ruined a band, but I guarantee you, man, those cats, at least a few of them could on when they were in a reflective mood, they could say, boy, Reed was stretching it out. Reed was adding vocal.
Well, of course. The thing is that isn't their goal. And that isn't the audience's goal necessarily. They don't. I think that who I am was counter to their direction, and we all pretended that wasn't true because we loved each other.
Wow. In here, set two here with Reed Mathis here on the Jake Feinberg Show. You said you were with Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey for 15 years. You guys made a bevy of albums. Can you talk about the seminal, like what was in your mind, how did that band stay together for so long, and what was to you, what was the most redeeming when you look back on that collaboration? What is the thing that you think about if you ruminate at all about these things?
What's the question?
How did you guys stay together for 15 years? And what is the thing you look back on most fondly from that experience?
Well, we stayed together for 15 years because Brian Hoff and I just refused to quit. But when we started in 1994, there were 8 of us. Brian on piano, Sean Layton on drums, Kyle Wright on trumpet, Matt Leland on trombone, Rod Mackey on saxophones, Dov McHarg on guitar, and Matthew Edwards on percussion. And that 8-piece, I guess Rod left in 95. So then we were a 7-piece, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. In 99, Sean attempted suicide twice, and we all decided that he should take a break from touring. And Matt Edwards switched from percussion to drum set, and then we were a 6-piece for a year, and then Dov and Kyle and Leland left. And then it was just me and Brian and Matt Edwards starting in 2000. And then in 2001, Matt Edwards left. And then it was just me and Brian from the first lineup. And then Brian's little brother Richard played drums for 6 months in 2001, and then we met this dude, Jason Smart, after a gig in Cincinnati, and he joined the band, and he played drums with us for 5 years. And then this kid, Josh Raymer, showed up, and I made the decision to hire him instead of Jason in 2007. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Brian and I just kept going.
Right.
Just kept going, man.
Is it the longevity and the stick-to-itiveness that you feel most like content about when you look back at the legacy of Jacob Fred?
The longevity?
Well,
No.
Okay, so yeah, what is the most redeeming thing about? Because I mean, you guys went through different iterations. So I mean, what is?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking about redeeming, but I can tell you what my favorite thing we ever did was.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I use vocabulary very loosely. What's your favorite thing? Yeah.
My favorite thing we ever made was this album called Winterwood. And we made it. It was our last album together, and it was the record I'd been trying to make for 15 years with those guys, and we finally did it. And then they didn't release it.
Oh.
But we spent a year on it, and it is the finest thing we ever made by 10 miles, in my opinion. But before it came out, I left the group. And I think that there were so many of my compositions on there and my arrangements, and it just so much reflected what Jacob Fred meant to me that they felt like it was too personal of a Reed album for them to put out without me in the group. So, but they also own it. So I can't put it out either.
So it has not. It was released after you left, or it never has been released.
No, it has not come out. But it's a friggin' masterpiece, man. It's the best thing we ever made.
Winterwood, man. This is Reed. It's so enlightening to hang with you, man. I hope we can pick up and do maybe a set 3 around the winter holidays or something. It's great to connect with my peers. I've been woodshedding with the graybeards for a long time, and it's an honor to talk to the younger generation, man. I just appreciate you taking the time today.
Sure. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
All right, we'll connect real soon, and much love to you, man. Continued success. Keep pushing forward, man. Keep doing it.
That is my plan. You do as well.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Peace. Pretty inspiring Jake Feinberg show today. Vince Wilburn Jr., the nephew of the great Miles Davis. And we didn't even talk about Don Cheadle. He was very instrumental in that whole documentary that just came out. And then gifted bass player Reed Mathis, who does not fit into any textbook dictionary definition of a bassist. The guy who has plenty of opinions and thoughts and lets it all hang out on stage. And that's when he's most comfortable, is when he's ashamed. Pretty profound stuff. That's a wrap of the Jake Feinberg Show. Again, another edition in the books. We'll be back next week at the same time. Thanks to Mike Roper, as always. Until then, peace.
I've been playing blues for quite a while. I've been around the world a few times. But I don't understand. I just like to play the blues. It's not all the money that I want. I just like to play the blues. And I like for everybody to get together and all of us play the blues. Let's have a good time. Because blues is where it's at. I'm telling you, I love it. I can't help but play it. So when you wake up in the morning,
You're a gig.
and ain't got no money, or no gig, whatever you call it, you ain't got nothing but the blues no way, baby. Or either your old lady go do yagging you and arguing with you, tell you what you get up and do something. And go to the steel mill, and you know you're going to see, and that's usually the blues too. So sometimes you really don't know what to do. And when you get worried, all you can do is reach and grab the harmonica and try to play the blues a little bit. Here's the blues.
Here we go.